Welcome to our final lesson in Unit 3, Area Study 2, which is hopefully going to pull together a lot of information we've covered already. So as a quick recap, we'll start with this slide here where I'm going to play you as the role of my employer. I'm going to be the employee, and this is building on subsequent lessons. So if you've seen this before, this is hopefully going to see where everything fits together as one great jigsaw. So remember again, I'm the employer at your fast food restaurant. I want better terms and conditions. I want better pay. You're the employer. You would like to get better profits. You want to improve your market share, your shareholder expectations. We're linked together via this employment contract, a written document with the terms and conditions of employment about my pay, hours, and leave and my entitlements. I want more from you. You want more from me. This should be a song, really. Now, if we don't agree, though, we're going to have a tussle here. We're going to draw this out today. It's about the disputes. If I'm not in agreement with you, how can I exert power on you? If you don't agree with me, how can you exert power on me? So we're going to explore a few of these. And then we're going to see the role of human resources in trying to resolve that dispute, how they can help to play that pivotal line in keeping us in balance so one of us doesn't overpower the other and we cripple the business. And we're equally going to see today how the Fair Work Commission can come in that overarching role in the dispute resolution process. So all of this is now coming together. Today we're going to focus on dispute resolution and how all of these components come into play together. So welcome to our lesson on dispute resolution. And our final dot point here for the study design for this area study is about an overview. So we're only required to have an understanding of an overview of the dispute resolution process. But two specific things we've got to include are mediation and arbitration. Okay, so building up from our concept map, there can sometimes be a dispute between you as an employer and me as an employee. Okay, so the dispute is any conflict that can occur as a result of a disagreement, and in this case, in a business context, it's about maybe pay, working conditions, or an argument between two employees, managers, employees, etc. So something has happened here where I'm not happy with your decision or you're not happy with mine. Okay, maybe I want better pay and you're not willing to give it to me. Maybe you want me to work the weekends and I don't want to do it for you. Okay, so there's some dispute occurring here. Now, you can understand this can start off a small scale thing like no, yes, no, all that type of stuff, like a schoolyard scenario, but it can quickly escalate. And imagine a business scenario where if I'm really determined to increase my pay and you're not willing to do that, what can I do to exert power on you to influence your decision or to head you in my way? So this becomes a power play relationship between the two of us. Probably the most famous one you've heard of is a strike. Okay, effectively it's a stoppage. I refuse to work today. You want me to work at the weekend. I'm not willing to work for you unless you pay me extra. Okay, so that scenario there, I've gone on strike. I'm refusing to work, and that work stoppage has been initiated by me. I'm trying to put pressure on you. Another example is the go slow, okay? Now, unlike strikes, where if I don't do it in the correct measures, you can discipline me by actually dismissing me for failure to complete my contract. In this one here, it's a little bit sneakier. So say I'm working for your fast food restaurant and I'm making pizzas for you and I'm putting the toppings on and I'm not happy because you're not paying me more money than I was asking for. So yes, I'm going to put my toppings on, I'm going to add the pepperoni, I'm going to add some pineapple, but now I'm just going to do it much slower. So I reach for the pepperoni and I put it on the pizza really slowly. Being very dramatic here. But you get the idea. I'm still making pizzas for you. The customers are coming in wanting their pizzas. I'm still fulfilling the job that you asked me to do that's in my contract, making pizzas. The fact that I'm making it really slow is highly annoying to you. Your customers are now waiting for these pizzas. They're getting angry and aggressive and resentful for not getting the pizza on time. But you can't officially sack me because I'm still doing the job you wanted me to do. So my pressure tactic is to deliberately go slow to put pressure on you. Okay, so my reduction of profitability is annoying for you, and maybe you'll bow to my demands. I could equally say, okay, work to rule, following official rules. You may have like a big rush coming through and a whole bunch of orders for pizzas for a special work function, and my shift finishes officially at 8 o'clock. And although this work function wants the pizzas at 9 o'clock, I'm going to go, well, actually, my contract says I'm allowed to leave at 8. Sorry, and walk away. Again, that puts pressure on you as the employer that you're going to have to do something about it, and maybe you're going to bow into my demands for additional pay. Another pressure tactic here is boycotts. Okay, so refusing to have dealings with an organization. And another one here, pickets, those protests where you see people, we will not be moved. I could stand outside the front of your fast food restaurant saying, you're not paying me enough. Everyone unite in my favor. Sneakily, okay, I could even sabotage it. The idea being accidentally, oh, heaven forbid, but I've cut my finger while I'm actually making the pizza. I've got a Band-Aid on my thing, but accidentally I drop the Band-Aid into the pizza and the customer gets it. Or accidentally I damage your oven by turning it on too high, okay? Sneaky techniques to try and put pressure on you. But equally, you don't have to just deal with that. There are examples where you could go, okay, I'm not going to bow into your demands. I'm going to block you from the business. Famously, this occurred with Qantas, probably about a decade ago now, where it was a case of they literally shut down the airline to put pressure back on the employees and the unions that were asking for extra demands. Now, do we need to know all of that in detail? No, but the idea being is this provides a context to this next bit about how we resolve those disputes. So all of this together are the disputes themselves. There's something that one party wants from the other, and we're not getting a resolution. This is how it will unfortunately arise, where the pressure tactics to try and win over those power plays comes really important. Now, clearly, we don't want to have these disputes. These disputes over pay, working conditions can be time-consuming. They can be costly. We're going to have all this anxiety build up where people are walking on the streets to complain for getting their working conditions. It's going to destroy employee morale and motivation for working for that business. All of that could damage the long-term employee-employee relationships. So this whole process about disputes, we want to try and resolve them. Ideally, we don't want to have them in the first place. If we have good terms and conditions of employment, we don't need to go to this point here. But sometimes we need to have steps in place to resolve disputes when they occur. Okay, so here we're going to step through a sample process, just an idea of how a business may go about solving disputes. The first thing happens, and I've asked for more money from you as my employer, and you've said no. So I might then ask my shop steward, which is a union representative, to present the complaint to the manager. Okay, so I might ask you, please listen to my request for an additional pay rise. Now, if that doesn't work, we then have the step 2. So in this sample scenario, then maybe we take that step further by taking the complaint now to the owner or the employer or their representative. So we're elevating it up. So we know that if we can't get a resolution at the step 1, we move on to step 2. If now the owner still says no, we're not going to get any payment here, we can move to step 3. In this case here, it's about the employee and the employer now taking it to the human resource manager in that role to try and resolve the disputes. So I'm still asking for more money, you're still saying no. We're now bringing in a next level here where the human resource manager is going to listen. And we're going to have them act as a mediator. Now I'm going to draw in this word in the next slide, okay? But the idea being is that they will listen and act as a listening device between the two of us, just to facilitate communication. If that doesn't work, we know that there's a step 4 in place. In this case here, if we don't get resolution beforehand, then the matter can get referred to the Fair Work Commission. Again, we've heard of this group before. This is the overarching group that looks after workplace relations. They're an independent body there to help us resolve disputes. And their first probably point of call is, again, to use mediation to solve that issue. Again, if we still don't get resolution in, we can have a step 5. The idea being we can have our matter referred to the Fair Work Commission. We've heard of this group again. One of their roles is to resolve disputes, and we can do that via arbitration, which again I'll look to in the next lesson. So what we have here is by having a sample process and making a policy or procedure in the business so people know that we can resolve disputes if we can't resolve them directly with our manager at the first point of call. So let's explore these 2 words in particular. Mediation and arbitration as a means of dispute resolution. Mediation is a method of industrial dispute resolution. It's going to be our approach that we're going to use to solve this dispute, where an independent third party, who we will call the mediator, will help the parties talk about their issues and arrive at their own agreement. So if we take this picture down here, let's pretend that this over here is the employer and this over here is the employee. This person here is acting as an independent third party. They're there to listen to both sides and facilitate agreements and discussions. So it's about them saying, okay, now listen to the other person here, and what do they think they've got to offer? Is there potential for compromise? Okay, they're not going to offer any agreement. They're purely there to listen and help you, as being the two parties, reach your own agreement. So it's about them reaching their own resolution between themselves. So in this role here, what are the advantages to just listening and guiding communication between the two groups who are at the moment having a dispute between them? Well, the idea being is purely by having that third-party role of listening and guiding, we're allowing the working relationship to still work on itself. We're still allowing the groups to communicate to each other, and the relationship is still hopefully going to be about them resolving that by themselves. So it's promoting positive working relationships because these two will still make the decision together. Hopefully, we're going to reach a win-win, okay? Because as the manager and the employee reach a resolution, hopefully they're only going to agree to it if they both get to a point where they're both happy with the terms and conditions. That's going to be a win-win scenario. The other benefit is this mediator is hopefully going to prevent this relationship breaking down because they may be skilled in this role in terms of allowing the communication to flow and being involved in just calming the parties down, getting them to listen to each other. All of those type of counseling type skills will hopefully allow these two to reach a resolution while talking to each other. It's also hopefully less formal than going to arbitration, which we're going to cover in our next lesson. So the next part of it is about this whole resolution if we don't get to that point here, but hopefully mediation is going to allow it to resolve itself in a nice working relationship. What's the disadvantage of having this third party listening in and guiding the conversation? Well, arguably, they don't have to reach a resolution. They could still bicker about the terms and conditions and keep going on without resolving it. Just the fact that the third person is there doesn't force them into that final resolution. So there is a potential that the dispute won't be resolved. There's no guarantees. The other thing is, although they might agree to it here, it's not going to be binding on them, and they might then renege on that conditions later on. They go, oh, I didn't really say that. I really want this, and they can go back to that previous dispute stage. So mediation as a technique is really good at trying to allow the two parties to try and solve it themselves. The independent mediator is just there to help guide the discussion. They're there to listen, and they're just there to help support, but without offering any solutions. Okay, the other form of dispute resolution process we're going to look at here is arbitration. Technically, this is a much more formal process. What will happen here is when an independent third party hears arguments from both disputing parties and then makes a legally binding decision to resolve the conflict. So it's going to be a scale up from mediation. What we're looking at here is where the person first of all listens to the disputes and is then going to make a binding decision, yes or no, in favor of one party. So their job is purely to end this dispute and to resolve it definitely on that background behind there. So often we see like these pictures here of arbitration in a very formal sense where the hammer comes down, okay, resolved. Now to do that and to have that legal authority, we use the Fair Work Commission for this role. So one of its key roles in operating is to act as this independent tribunal where they're going to listen to both sides and then make a defining decision based upon that. So it will look like a court case. It's going to be similar flavor to that tribunal court case where both sides get to have representatives and put their case forward. And then the Fair Work Commission will make a decision one way or the other, binding on one party. So the commission, as it says here, will listen to each party make their case and then will make a legally binding order into how it must be resolved. Okay, so putting this together. So arbitration is when an independent third party will listen to both sides and then make a defining decision in favor of one party or the other. So clearly one benefit is that we will definitely reach a resolution to this dispute. There's a guarantee because that is the end result of arbitration. One way or the other, there's a decision going to be made. Also, because it's legally binding, both parties are going to have to adhere to it. They've had their chance to make their discussions before, to make this case, and therefore, in essence, the Fair Work Commission has that binding legal decision at the end of it, which then puts that dispute to an end. The disadvantage, clearly, when we have a winner, we will have a loser. So therefore, when we get to this point where it's two parties together, making their petitions for what they want, and then the Fair Work Commission making a decision either one way or the other, someone's going to win. And therefore, inherently, someone's going to lose. And someone's going to feel mighty upset that they didn't get what they wanted. So this is going to be a very legalistic, formal, time-consuming process, and is therefore more expensive than mediation. And we've lost the chance now for the win-win. We're now at a win-lose situation where one party is feeling supported, whereas the other party may feel that they've lost. Okay, let's work through a worked example here of how we might see some of this content covered in an assessment task or an end-of-year examination. So we've got a classic question here. So evaluate whether mediation will be appropriate for a long-running and hostile dispute. Now, as always, we look at what these task words mean. So when we get an evaluate question, I often describe it to my students as, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and what is your opinion in relation to that scenario? Okay, so here we have a situation of a long-running and hostile dispute. So we're looking for the strengths, the weaknesses, and an opinion that comes to with it. Now, if we look at that in terms of the marks, exactly how it's laid out. We're looking for the advantages, the disadvantages, and an opinion of whether it's appropriate for this scenario. So now let's look at that in that worked example. If we were to read through this first bit here, all the strengths are covered here. So mediation is good dispute resolution process as it promotes positive working relationships in the business as the two disputing parties ultimately make the decision together. It is also less formal, less time consuming, and less expensive process than arbitration, and therefore is less disruptive to business. So we've got a nice succinct paragraph there expressing the strengths. Equally, the evaluate requires an understanding of the negatives, the disadvantages. So, however, in mediation, there is no guarantee that the dispute will be finally resolved. And as there is no final legally binding decision, the end decision could be dismissed by the employer or employee in the future. We've got the negatives. Now, importantly, we've got to link it through to the scenario. And we don't have to be for it. We may say in this case, as you'll see here, that mediation maybe isn't the best. So this is your personal justification for why or why not mediation will be appropriate in this scenario. So, in my opinion, as the dispute has been long-running and hostile, mediation is unlikely to be appropriate in this scenario. Now we're going to give our justification. Because the mediator can't give advice or possible solutions, the negotiations still rely on the two parties coming to a compromise, which is unlikely given the length and hostility of the dispute. Therefore, it is probably time that the two parties consider going for an arbitration hearing to resolve the dispute. So there's our justification, and now we've got all three components of the question, and therefore we're looking for a full mark allocation. Well done. Okay, let's look at this mega question activity. Which of the following human resources terms could best be described as commonly the most time-consuming and expensive dispute resolution process due to the legal parties and legal issues involved? So quite a complex little statement there. Have a think about it. Which one is most appropriate? Excellent. Well done. Arbitration is the most lengthy and drawn out and usually more expensive because of the lawyers you're going to have to involve as well in putting up your case to the Fair Work Commission. Okay, well, hopefully on this slide here, it's a nice way of bringing it all together. You can see in a summary of both of these dispute resolution processes, the similarities and differences between them. So mediation, first of all. Mediation, independent third party, is going to help them talk about the issues and arrive at their own agreement. So we're not giving them any advice. We're not telling them what to do. We're not giving them solutions. We're just allowing that communication to flow. So therefore, the disputing parties have control. Okay, it's their decision to make. It's their resolution. The disadvantage is we can't guarantee a final decision. They just might continually be complaining and have grievances between each other. The other role here, the impartial third party does not offer any advice. It's fairly informal process. Okay, so that's mediation. Opposite to that, we have arbitration. This is where the independent third party listens to both sides of the dispute and then makes a decision, which is legally binding on both parties. So this is going to be much more formal, a process where we're going to make a final decision that's binding on both groups. So in this scenario, these parties have no control over the final decision because they can't resolve it themselves. They're going to use the Fair Work Commission to help resolve it for them. It will end up with a legally binding decision, guaranteed. And the independent party makes that final decision, the Fair Work Commission. And it's usually been seen as the most formal dispute resolution process compared to mediation, which is much more informal. So what do both of them have in common? Well, both of them require an independent third party to be part of those conversations. So whether it be the Human Resource Manager or representatives from the Fair Work Commission, we've got an independent third party involved in there. And generally, they're going to be more formal. When we get to mediation or arbitration, it's gone beyond just simply the manager and the employee trying to resolve themselves. We've brought in additional third parties, and that becomes a more formal process. So in this slide here, let's pull it all together and then just see how all these terminology come together in resolving a dispute. So let's pretend this one here. Okay, you're the employer. You've only offered me a 1% pay rise. Okay, I'm not happy with that at all. Okay, I want 10%. So over here, I want 10%, and all my colleagues and my union members want 10%, but you're only willing to offer us 1%. Okay, so we've got a dispute already. I can feel it coming. If you don't cave into my demands, there's going to be strikes, go slow, work to rule, all sorts of things I'm going to threaten you, and you're probably going to threaten me with a lockout. So we have that dispute in process, and now we want to try and resolve that dispute. So the first thing we're going to probably do is involve some mediation. We're going to have a third party involved, whether it's a human resource manager, or we're going to involve a representative from the Fair Work Commission to try and talk to us and guide us about communicating to each other, expressing our needs and why we want our certain objectives, and whether we can reach a compromise between us. So with the role of the mediation and with that communication going on, we're slowly compromising. We're trying to resolve this dispute. So you're willing to now offer 3% and I'm willing to lower it down to 7%, but we're not quite there yet, okay? And despite all the mediation helps, we're not still resolving this dispute. There's still a little bit of distance between us. So this is the point at which now we're going to bring in arbitration, okay? We've had our chance to resolve it ourselves. We've had independent third parties be involved in mediation to help us resolve it. We're still at odds. And so now we're going to go to a Fair Work Commission hearing, an arbitration hearing, to make a decision between the two parties. So now at this point here, our side is offering 5%. Your side is offering 4%, and it's up to this independent third party to now make a decision bindingly one way or the other. And we will end up with the win-lose scenario here. So hopefully you can see, though, this little framework here shows how these parties come together, how they've all got a role to play in dispute resolution, and that eventually we're going to reach a process which will wrap up this dispute and allow us to get back to work and do what we were setting out to do in the first place. Hopefully that will make sense. That wraps up our Unit 3 Area Study 2 on Human Resource Management. Look forward to seeing you in our next lesson where we'll cover Area Study 3, Operations Management. Look forward to seeing you then.